The Rams NFL franchise has won in every single decade except for the 30s. But why is it that the once 30-year-old coach, the youngest coach to ever coach in the NFL, Sean McVay, is somebody that could change everything about this organization forever? We'll find out now. All right, welcome back, folks. I'm Jake Ellenbogen, and today I'm going to be talking about the importance of Sean McVay that you might not even realize. Before we get into that, I'd ask if you do enjoy this at any point, be sure to hit the thumbs up button as well as the subscribe button if you're interested. But let's dive into it. So the Rams are one of the most winning organizations in the sport. They're tied for 6th place all time in wins. They can get to 600 with an opening day win against the Buffalo Bills. But the point I'm making here is that the Rams are clearly a well-respected organization, a well-respected franchise, and have had a history of winning throughout the 40s all the way to now. But why is it that as great as this organization is, and as many Hall of Famers as it's had, from guys like Kurt Warner and Norm Van Brocklin and Bob Waterfield to Eric Dickerson, Marshall Faulk, Isaac Bruce, Henry Ellard, Jack Youngblood, Aaron Donald, whoever you want to name, there have been some incredible players that have worn the horns. However, the Rams only have 4 world championships, and 2 of which aren't even really talked about, considered, or even respected by today's NFL Super Bowl standards. However, we talk about the days of Eric Dickerson, the 80s, and of course the 60s with the fearsome foursome Rams. But the Rams, truthfully, had not won since 51, when the greatest show on turf finally was able to end the drought of a world title against the Tennessee Titans in a 1-yard short moment. How is it a team that was founded in 36 and joined the NFL in 37, with all of the success they've had, only have 4 titles? How is that possible? 8 conference championships, 18 division titles, and 31 playoff appearances. As I've mentioned, they have appeared in the playoffs in every single decade. So is this the most underachieving organization of all time? No, because they've won titles and there are other teams in the league that simply have never won the big game. However, has this organization underachieved? And why is it, if they have, why is it that I believe Sean McVay is about to change it forever? Well, here's the thing. Before Sean McVay, and right after they had just gone to their last playoff appearance, from 2005 to 2016, the Rams were 60, 131, and 1. Think about how god-awful that stretch is. Sean McVay comes to the table. Sean McVay leads the Rams to 55-26 the moment he walks through the door, 7-3 in the postseason with 2 NFC titles, and of course, the most recent Super Bowl victory over the Cincinnati Bengals. That was only their 4th title, though, and it's only the 2nd world championship they've had after 1951. So here's the deal. They're 2nd in the league right now in gross value. They are the defending champions. And on top of that, they have started this whole mantra, F them picks. As we've learned about the NFL being a copycat league, everyone is trying to copy. But here is why the Rams are extremely dangerous and why Sean McVay is extremely dangerous. This past year, after they won the Super Bowl, Sean McVay was offered a job with Amazon to be one of their broadcasters for Amazon Prime. He is going to get many of these opportunities because he is a once-in-a-generation type of coach and football mind. He is the next Belichick. He is the next Madden. He is the next whoever you want to put there. Walsh, Lombardi. He is that guy. And he's already proven that. So here's the thing. When you look at this organization, why is it that they only have 4 titles? Well, when you look at 45, they had Waterfield. Waterfield extended in the 50s. They lost the title in 1950, coached by Joe Stidahar, and he came back in 1951 to win the NFL championship. But here's the thing. Why is it that that team only won 1 title? Because Hampton Poole, the assistant, got into a fight with Stidahar and basically took his job. And as we know, if you've watched the channel before, you know Rams history, they didn't do very well after that. Then you look at the fearsome foursome Rams. As great as they were, they could not get over the hump. They would lose to the Packers and the Vikings in the 60s. And while we know the 60s, the Rams had success, they really only had success once 66 hit. For the majority of the 60s, up until 66, the Rams actually weren't very good. The 70s, the Rams showed promise. However, they couldn't get past Dallas. They could not get past Washington. And once again, they could not get past the Vikings. If you move on to the 80s, what happened in the 80s? A good football team, but they ran into the Bill Walsh 49ers, a team that is widely regarded as more popular, as more prestigious, and a better organization than the LA Rams. But should they really be considered that? Despite the fact that really, if you think about it, their entire run was about a 14-year run, and that's really been it for the Niners. Of course, the Rams organization didn't help the Rams case when they got into it with superstar running back Eric Dickerson, once they finally got a quarterback in Jim Everett to lead them to the promised land, and they subsequently traded away Eric Dickerson once they got that piece. And, of course, they did not win in the 80s either. You move on to the 90s with Tony Banks and Chris Miller and Mark Rippon. And let's be honest, the start of the 90s was looking like the start of the 60s. However, it was the combination of Dick Vermeil and Mike Martz. Mike Martz would join the St. Louis Rams, and he would become the offensive coordinator and one of the best, if not the best, offensive coordinator in all of football. That's what led the Rams to the greatest show on turf. They would trade for Marshall Faulk. They would draft Torrey Holt. Of course, Isaac Bruce from his days with L.A., showing that he could already be a 1,700-yard receiver if need be. And they had Trent Green, a guy that they were very excited about. Well, Trent Green goes down with the injury, of course. As we know, the rest is history because Kurt Warner eventually takes over and leads them to the promised land. But again, this was only the third title they've had and the first ever Super Bowl they had had. They have had a lot of production and a lot of winning throughout the different decades in their history. Not many other teams have been that consistent. So then you move on after the greatest show on turf. What ended the greatest show on turf? Well, there are a lot of things, but a few things that are out there that I've been told by players that actually played on the team was that first and foremost, not going back and re-signing London Fletcher was a very, very big wrench into the plans of the greatest show on turf. The defense loved him as the premier leader, and they let him go in free agency. He ended up becoming a legend somewhere else. Little things, but when you think about it, they have great outcomes and not always in your favor. Then you look at the fact that they had Kurt Warner fall into their lap. This guy that ended up being one of the best quarterbacks in all of football, was an MVP and led them to their first ever Super Bowl and third ever title. They pushed him out after he started getting hurt. And when he got hurt and started playing poorly, they pushed him out. They moved in Mark Bulger, who would never win a Super Bowl with said Rams. In addition to that, on top of all of that, Dick Vermeil. Dick Vermeil decides to retire, although he comes back to the Chiefs. It's widely, a lot of people believe that Dick Vermeil was forced into retirement to let Mike Martz take over the helm as the head coach. And what we found out with Mike Martz is that as great of an offensive mind as he is, he simply was not the head coach that Dick Vermeil was. He was not the leader and the unifier that Dick Vermeil was. So, as we saw, a potential dynasty turned into a nightmare, which has been known as the same old sorry-ass Rams, otherwise known as Sosar. And Sosar went on with the run I just mentioned earlier in the video, 60 and 131-1. That's all until Sean McVay took the helm, went 55-26. And now Sean McVay has the helm, and he's coming off his Super Bowl win. And if you're wondering, because there have been moments in the history of the Rams where things have gotten derailed, as we just mentioned with the greatest show on turf, and Hampton Poole pushing out Joe Stidahar, and the trading of Eric Dickerson, these things have derailed where they were going. But Sean McVay has already overcome that. And that is why we're talking about what we're talking about right now. Because I need you to know, if you take anything away from this video, I need you to realize that Sean McVay got a hold of success a little early in his career. Sometimes you get a hold of success too early and it can derail you. Well, Sean McVay did lose the Super Bowl to Bill Belichick in his second season. And yes, he did not make the playoffs the next year, even though they went 500 and they would have made it in today's format with the 7 teams. However, even though Sean McVay didn't make it. And it could have looked like it was becoming what ended up being the greatest show on turf. Sean McVay kicked in. His growth kicked in. And ultimately, with the help of Les Snead not being afraid to go out and make moves, and Tony Pastors with his strategic signings, they were able to turn it around. They had a quarterback in Jared Goff who they liked, but Sean McVay knew, as much as he liked the guy, he was not getting to where he needed to go. And so Sean McVay, after 2020, and they lost in the divisional round against the Green Bay Packers, acknowledged that this is not going to work. Other organizations and other coaches might not have. You still see teams all around the league. You have the Titans starting Ryan Tannehill. With all due respect, you have the Raiders starting Derek Carr. Are these guys Super Bowl champion quarterbacks? I don't think so. Well, that's the thing. Sean McVay, instead of being complacent, instead of going with the flow, he decided to go balls to the wall and push for the team to trade for Matthew Stafford, who was, in all honesty, a potential superstar quarterback that was hiding in Detroit. So insert Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford comes in, they win the Super Bowl. This is Sean McVay. And you know what else is Sean McVay? The fact that they have been able to find these coaches and they have been able to scout these draft prospects and undrafted rookie free agents. It's not just F them picks from Les Snead's perspective. He realizes that people eat that up, but he knows it's more than just that. He knows that they can't have that ideology if they don't go out and they make the right picks and they develop said picks. You can't go out and just trade away all your first round talent. You can't go out and just trade away all your first round picks for top-notch talent and pay them if you're not hitting on your lower level picks. And as we know, the Rams have gotten good at that all across the board. You have a third round pick in Cooper Kupp, who ends up becoming the best wide receiver in the NFL and having a Triple Crown season, winning the Super Bowl MVP and Offensive Player of the Year. You have a fourth round tight end in Tyler Higbee, is arguably a top 10 tight end in the league and is probably the greatest tight end in Rams history. How about your third round pick in Joseph Noteboom, who you sat on for years because you had Andrew Whitworth who wanted to sign with this team. And so there you were able to develop Joseph Noteboom into a starter, and now he's going to be your starting left tackle, a former third round pick. How about the former fifth round pick in David Edwards, who's starting at left guard? The former fourth round pick in Brian Allen, who's starting at center. Coleman Shelton was the guy they picked off of waivers when the rival Arizona Cardinals let him go. And the right tackle is the second round pick that they have extended as well. So the whole offensive line, except for Coleman Shelton, has been won because of other draft picks that weren't first rounders. As a matter of fact, the only first round pick the Rams have had on their roster right now is Aaron Donald. And that was back in 2014. And he's the best player in football. Jalen Ramsey was a first round pick, but the Rams went out and traded for him. You look at Nick Scott, a former seventh round pick out of Penn State, who was pretty much drafted to be a special teams guy, has turned into one of the stars in the back end of the secondary. On top of that, Jordan Fuller, the sixth round pick out of Ohio State, who was deemed too slow, is also considered one of the starters. Taylor Rapp is the highest pick of all the safeties in the back end of the secondary as a second rounder, and most people expect them to keep the lower round guys than him. In addition to that, you have Terrell Burgess, who was drafted in the third round. On top of that, another third round pick was Ernest Jones, who was turning into an absolute stud at the linebacker spot. This is what happens. The Rams have to make those moves. They have to do those things in order to be able to, quote unquote, F them picks. Now, here's where it gets tricky. And here's where it gets kind of scary if you're not a Rams fan. Because Sean McVay is getting better each year. Sean McVay had issues with play calling. Sean McVay had issues with personnel. Sean McVay didn't have enough of a footprint in the defense. He has changed all of that. He had issues with timeouts. He has changed that. He had issues with challenges. He has changed that. He has gotten better each year because he continues to grow and develop as a young coach in the NFL. While he's already seen success, this is not a Sean McVay coach team that is going to have a hangover from the Super Bowl. He understands that it's a year in, year out basis. And so with the way he coaches his team, you can't expect this team to fall off. And I'm not saying this year, next year, or the year after. I'm saying as long as Sean McVay is the head coach of the LA Rams, they will always have a chance to compete. Quarterbacks are very important in this league. So he may not win a Super Bowl after Matthew Stafford if he can't find a quarterback. But if he continues to coach, he is going to be able to keep this thing going and them winning. So what is his ceiling? And ultimately, how dangerous can he be to the rest of the NFL? I'll say this right now. The thing that makes the Rams even more dangerous is the fact that they are the second highest valued franchise in the NFL. Why does that matter? It's not money that's going to the fans. It's not money that you're seeing. However, it does pretty much make sure that the owner, Stan Kroenke, is not going to back out. Like you've seen in the past, Raiders team refused to pay Khalil Mack, so they traded him away. The Rams aren't that team. And so while they might make some mistakes here and there, they might sign a Todd Gurley a little too early, they might sign a Goff too early, they might sign Alec Ogletree, they might do things like that. They have the money to basically withstand any sort of damage that they do, any sort of mistake they make. They can absorb that because they're not a small market. Whereas small market teams, if you make a mistake, it can be 5-year altering. And that's the thing that makes the Rams so dangerous in addition to Sean McVay. Because Sean McVay, what he's doing, whether you realize it or not, is he's putting together a giant coaching tree of himself all over the NFL. And everybody wants a piece of Sean McVay. When as soon as Shane Waldron went to the Seahawks, everyone thought that the Seahawks were automatically going to be the next Sean McVay offense because Shane Waldron was part of the Sean McVay descent. Then you look over at Kevin O'Connell with the Vikings. Everyone's talking about how Sean McVay's offense can do wonders for the Vikings and so forth. And so this is the thing. He is the most influential coach already in the NFL. He is the most dominant coach in the NFL at this point. He is the youngest coach in the NFL with the success he has, because no one as young as him has the success that he has. And so this is what happens when you have a coach that is that certain that what he's doing is right. And even when he's not certain, he's willing to make the adjustments to change it. That's what makes them so scary. The Rams have won 4 NFC titles. 4 NFC titles in their history. And Sean McVay has half of them. He just joined the team in 2017. This team is now one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl yet again, and one can expect the way Sean McVay builds his teams, the schemer that he is, the developer he is, and the coach he is, this team's just going to continue to run roughshod of the rest of the NFL. There are other teams that are trying to keep up and try to find the next Sean McVay, and there's not another one out there. So how does Sean McVay ultimately change the course of the Rams' history? How is he that transformative? How does he change the Rams franchise forever? He's already done it, because Sean McVay has shown you. He went through one of those moments with the Eric Dickerson moment, with the Mike Martz moment, and the London Fletcher moment, and the Hampton Pool Joe Stidhar moment. Those moments, the bumps in the road that forced the Rams to then fall off a cliff and have to come back, which they always did. But those moments, they always forced the Rams, they derailed them. Sean McVay already went through that. He lost the Super Bowl, then missed the playoffs, but he came back. And everything considered, all things considered, everything he's done, he has shown you that he is here to stay and he is here to conquer. And Sean McVay only has one goal in mind: to keep winning until he ultimately decides to hang it up. And say this guy's around for another 20 years. Look at what Jared Goff did the first year without Sean McVay. I know he was a rookie, and I know he didn't have the talent around him that he did the next year. However, Sean McVay had a big hand in pushing him to the potential elite level that he could have been. Goff fell off, and then you look at Stafford, And we talked about for years, if Stafford went to a good situation, he could win a Super Bowl or at least win a playoff game. Well, he won the whole thing as soon as he joined Sean McVay's side. Did Sean McVay need him as much as Stafford needed Sean McVay? Absolutely. But that point still stands. So who's to say, if you're sitting there hoping, as a non-Rams fan, Rams hater, whatever, if you're hoping that Sean McVay is going to fall off and you think that because Matthew Stafford retires and Sean McVay sticks around, he's not going to be able to find his guy, or if you think Sean McVay is going to retire because he doesn't believe he's going to find his guy after Matthew Stafford, you haven't been paying attention. Sean McVay has the brain trust all around him. He's got the guys that can help him. He's got the associates. You talk about having everything, it's Sean McVay. That doesn't mean Trey Lance and the 49ers might not be a problem in the next 10 years. It's not to say that Kyler Murray can eventually become a problem with Cliff Kingsbury. It's not to say that Seattle won't find their starting quarterback this upcoming season, maybe with a Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. However, I believe, and I'll take it to the bank, even after Aaron Donald, even after Jalen Ramsey, even after Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp and all these guys, Sean McVay will continue doing what Sean McVay does. Sean McVay will have to build up a roster again. It's not something he's never done before. But what are your thoughts? Because ultimately, I believe that the Rams went through all those shortcomings, and the Rams have been somewhat underachieving. But I think now we're going to start to see this Rams team and the Super Bowls and the championships start to match the type of prestigious organization that they truly are. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'm Jake Ellenbogen. Be sure to hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed this. I have more videos of this. And be sure to hit the like button as well. Thank you guys, and you guys take care.